Night draped itself over Ither Prime in exact, measured strands of light. Rain fell in perfect diagonals, every droplet guided by atmospheric regulators until it struck glass at pre-approved vectors. Sky trams slid between towers without stutter, their hum a part of the city's heartbeat, synchronized and predictable. From the 67th floor of Tower Verge, Shaw sat in silence, watching condensation bead and streak across the interior of his window. He had grown used to that silence. It was the shape of his life steady, sterile, precise. Barefoot on cold composite tile, he kept himself very still. Stillness was his discipline. It was how he endured 12-hour shifts of listening to the ghosts of dead colonies. Cracked transmissions, voices begging for rescue no one would send, fragments of cultures swallowed by void. Shaw catalogued them, restored what he could, preserved them before silence claimed even their last echo. Others called it morbid work. He called it necessary. Yet he did it alone, as he did everything. The city made it easier that way. People noticed if you stayed still too close to them, and sooner or later they asked what you were hiding. He had no interest in explaining. The room glowed faintly from the orange bands of his console, another collapsed beacon whispering through static. Then movement disturbed the edge of his vision. Shaw froze. The city outside was engineered to prevent surprises. Nothing moved here unless it was authorized. He muted the console, heart steady but taut, and turned toward the glass. At first it looked like a ripple, a distortion in the rain-slick surface. Then it resolved into a figure on the exterior maintenance ledge. A person, barefoot, soaked, shoulders trembling from exhaustion. For a moment, Shaw simply stared, every instinct telling him this couldn't be real. No alarms had sounded, no drones had flagged an intruder. But she was there alive, alert, and one slip away from falling into the abyss of traffic lanes far below. The woman leaned forward. Her breath fogged a small bloom against the pane. With one finger she traced words into the condensation. "Let me in." Shaw did not move for 2 full seconds. It wasn't fear that held him. It was calculation. The ledge height, her posture, the surveillance blind spots he knew too well. Every signal told him this wasn't a trick or an illusion. She was real. She was desperate. And she was about to collapse. The part of him trained to preserve signal, the part that refused to let fragments vanish, rose to the surface. He crossed the room quickly, released the window latch, and pulled it open. Warm, humid air spilled inside, sharp with ozone and rain. The woman stepped through at once, as if afraid the city would slam the door shut behind her. Water ran off her hair in heavy ropes, streaking down arms of luminous emerald skin. A translucent crimson wrap clung to her frame, torn along one thigh, plastered by condensation. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, tracking his every movement with wary precision. She was disciplined, not delirious, but every line of her body spoke of exhaustion. "Cereal," she said, voice carrying a soft, oceanic lilt despite her shaking breath. 3 nights out there. No doors opened. "Shaw," he answered evenly. His jaw was tight, but his voice did not break. "You chose the right one." He closed and locked the window, the hum of the seals settling between them and the endless order of the city. His stillness cracked, just enough to let her in. And for the first time in 8 years, the silence inside his tower did not belong to him alone. Shaw fetched a thermal sheet from the heater rail and held it out without ceremony. The woman took it, draping the fabric over her shoulders, though she left her hips uncovered. Defiance radiated from the choice. Removing it would have meant erasing herself, and he saw in her posture that she had endured too much erasure already. He didn't comment, only powered up the floor heater and set a towel by the vent. The small warming fan hummed to life. its glow softening the edges of the sterile room. She crouched close, hands outstretched toward the heat, water dripping from her crimson hair onto the towel. Shaw stood still, watching her profile as steam curled in the air. Her skin shimmered faintly where droplets clung, freckles glowing like starlight across her collarbones. "This place smells like silence," she said at last, her accent curling the words into something gentler than they might have been. "It's for listening," Shaw replied. His voice was level, though the rhythm of his heart had yet to settle. He forced it down. Panic wasted precision. He moved to the galley and lit a compact burner. Varin root broth with slivers of Draxin mushrooms, sharp, herbal, quick. The fragrance cut through the stale air of the tower. When the bowl was ready, he set it beside her. She accepted without thanks, which suited him better than gratitude. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and she did not flinch. Her shoulders eased as she ate, the tension in her arms unwinding. The faint bioluminescence under her skin brightened, subtle proof that warmth was seeping back into her veins. Shaw studied her silently, searching for details. Bruised shin, feet raw from metal ledges, eyes tracking everything in the room. Exhausted, yes, but disciplined, running on the last fumes of will. "I was a cultural envoy," she said, voice steadier now. "Myrick sent me here to open dialogue protocols. Your city reviewed my profile and labeled me unsuitable. Excessive effect expression. They revoked my permit in a single message." She smiled without mirth. "I haven't been touched in months. Why the ledges?" Shaw asked. "They don't scan for emotion," she answered simply. "No one looks sideways." It made sense. Ithrop punished chaos. The ledges were the only places chaos survived. "Your mission failed," he said. The words weren't cruel, only matter of fact. They wanted an echo, not a voice, she replied, setting the empty bowl down. Her gaze was sharp, clear. And I was not an echo. Shaw crossed to his wardrobe, pulled a graphite robe and a black underlayer, and trimmed the cloth to her frame with his utility blade. He handed them over. "Change. Then sleep." Her gold eyes narrowed slightly. "No conditions?" "You'll think clearer when you're warm," he said. His tone turned it into procedure, not kindness. She stood, letting the sheet fall, and slipped into the robe. She looked smaller, but sharper like a blade sheathed. "Why help me?" she asked. "You knocked," he answered. It was the only explanation he had, and the only one she needed. She hesitated and walked to the bed. The sheets whispered as she lay down, her eyes fixed on him until he settled on the couch across the room. "Shaw," she said, quietly. "Yes, thank you." He gave a small nod. "Sleep." Her breathing evened, steady as rain sliding down glass. Shaw stayed upright, watching her chest rise and fall. He had spent years preserving dying voices. Tonight, he had saved one that still breathed. And when at last he lay down, her name glowed faintly where she had written it in fog on the window. For the first time in years, Shaw didn't feel entirely alone. Shaw woke before the city's daylight cycle engaged. Ithrop Prime was never truly dark. The towers pulsed faint white along their spines, and sky trams glided even at off hours, but the room was hushed. Not the engineered silence the city demanded, but a softer kind, filled by the rhythm of another person's breath. Serial lay on her side, crimson hair tangled across the pillow, the graphite robe belted at her waist. Her skin glowed faintly at her collarbones, pulsing with each breath like a heartbeat visible. He rose without a sound. Old habit. Stillness first, movement only when necessary. He brewed Froenseed coffee in the galley, the bitter scent filling the air. He set one mug down by the low table, watching her stir awake. Her eyes opened, sharp at once, golden irises catching the dim glow. She pushed herself upright, spine straight despite fatigue, and studied him across the room. "You don't sleep long," she said, voice roughened by mourning. "Never did," he replied. "Because of the work?" "Because of the quiet. It gets louder when I close my eyes." She stood and moved to the window, stopping close enough that her breath fogged the glass. With one fingertip, she traced the faint outline of her name from last night. The letters glowed weakly, fading, but still there. She pressed her palm flat against it. "If I fail my appeal, I'm sent back to Myrix. Without envoy status, I'm nothing. Just a body with no assignment. Do you know what that means?" He said nothing at first. Instead, he tapped his console awake and brought up the secure archive panel. He'd requested her file quietly after she slept, breaking a rule of his own. The document glowed in sterile white text. Permit denied. Behavioral quarantine tag. Blacklisted from housing grid. They don't just deny you, he said. They erased you. She turned from the window slowly, the gold in her eyes sharper now. They called me destabilizing. My empathy variance score was above threshold. They flagged me as dangerous because I felt too much. Shaw studied the words on the console, then her face. So they built a system to detect apathy, not compassion. And when you proved the opposite, they exiled you. Her jaw tightened. For touching them. For greeting the assembly chair by hand. They logged it as breach. Her voice cracked once, then steadied again. If they deport me as a failed envoy, I will never be reassigned. My name will be struck from the Myrix registers. I will lose everything that made me more than a body. He reached into his archive, hesitated, then pulled a different file. The oldest one he kept. Static filled the room, in a fragile human voice. Name is Marin. Issa Marin. Please say it back. Someone say it. A message ended on a faint click. 28 seconds of a life preserved. Serial stood very still, hands clenched at her sides. They buried her, she whispered. In the data, Shaw said. But I keep her out of the dust. She stepped closer, gold eyes steady with a plea she hadn't spoken aloud. Then keep me too. He met her gaze. No words this time. He opened a new entry line in the registry panel, typed her name, and entered his tower code. The console blinked. Temporary co-resident authorization. Serial Miria. She exhaled sharply. Shoulders dropping like a weight had loosened. Then I'm part of this tower now? That's what it means, he said. You eat here, sleep here, stop stealing nutrient packs from lift shafts. If they look for you, they'll find a door with your name on it. Serial's lips curved faintly, fierce and soft all at once. You're calm when you do dangerous things. It keeps me alive, Shaw said. Maybe it will keep me alive too. She stepped back to the fogged glass and pressed her palm over her fading name. Then, beneath it, she wrote his. The two names glowed together, side by side, fragile against the rain. Shaw stood behind her, watching. For the first time in years, he wasn't listening to ghosts. He was listening to someone who still breathed. And something deep inside him, something long sealed, shifted toward her. Small, quiet, but real. By evening, the tower's air felt charged, tense in a way Shaw had not felt in years. The registry node he had built pulsed in the corner of his console, a quiet heartbeat of falsehood stitched into the city's perfect network. One wrong keystroke, and both their lives would be ash. He sat forward, steady, while Serial stood beside him, robe belted tight, her crimson hair tied back in a rough knot. Strands still clung damp to her neck from the sonic shower, and her golden eyes never left the code scrolling across the glass. First step is reconstructing your file, Shaw said. His voice was controlled, a tether against the quiet storm rising in his chest. Fragments from your envoy profile are still buried in the access logs. We recover enough, the system will recognize you. I know how to read Myric's code, she said softly. Arms folded, but focus absolute. They stripped my credentials, not my knowledge. He allowed himself a single nod. Then he began. For hours they worked in silence. The only sound the low hum of the console and the faint drip of water from the hydro tubes outside. Shaw pulled packet shards from abandoned nodes, each a fractured echo of her past. Serial leaned in, mapping them against cultural headers she had once designed herself. Her hands moved with practiced speed, her exhaustion pushed deep below discipline. Then she froze. Her breath caught sharp in her throat. Here, she said, pointing to a single line in her envoy record. Her voice was too calm, too deliberate. Shaw leaned closer. The entry glowed sterile white. Classification, non-compliant. Emotional anomaly. Status, removed. He frowned. This wasn't system error. Someone overwrote your record. Her jaw tightened, knuckles white where her fingers gripped the console edge. They didn't just deny me. They falsified me. They erased the part where I passed integration training. No one will believe you ever qualified, Shaw said grimly. They will, she whispered, if the code betrays the hand that did it. Shaw tapped open the timestamp layer. Numbers scrolled in precise succession, then stopped at a single point of divergence. Here, this line has a live admin key signature. Someone authorized your erasure. For a moment, neither spoke. The implication sat heavy in the room. This wasn't bureaucracy. It was sabotage. Serial's hands clenched, then unclenched. So my crime wasn't emotion. It was threatening someone with it. Then we build over the damage, Shaw said, and make sure the city has to see you again. They replaced the corrupted lines with clean fragments, her envoy profile flickering back into shape piece by piece. Every second, the risk grew sharper. At 93%, the console stuttered. A warning blinked red. Foreign protocol detected. Serial's body went rigid. They see me. No, Shaw said quickly, fingers darting across the keys. His hands moved with the steadiness of a surgeon. They see Myric's code. That's different. He stripped the lingering headers, burying the rest inside neutral syntax. The warning blinked once more, then vanished. Serial let out a sharp breath, shoulders trembling. You're steady, she whispered. I have to be, he said, not looking up. Or they win. The process bar inched forward. Then the console chimed, low and final. A new line appeared across the screen in undeniable text. Resident ID, Serial Muria. Status, active. Clearance, provisional. Serial stared. Her hands rose to her mouth. Her golden eyes filled until tears blurred the glow. I'm real, she breathed. You always were, Shaw said quietly. Now the city has to admit it. Before he could say more, she turned to him and closed the distance in 3 quick steps. Her arms wrapped tight around his shoulders, face pressed hard into his chest. For a half-beat, he froze, unpracticed in touch. Then his arms came up around her, strong, certain, anchoring her to him as if she might still vanish. They stood like that a long time. The consoles hummed soft behind them, the rain outside falling in perfect lines. Inside Tower Verge, order had been broken. And in that fracture, something alive had taken root. The rain cycle began early that evening, sweeping across Tower Verge in diagonals, too precise to be natural. Shaw watched the stream slide down the glass, his console still humming faintly in the background. The registry entry pulsed like a quiet victory. Resident ID, Serial Muria. Status, active. For the first time since she had appeared on his window ledge, she was no longer a ghost. The city could pretend not to see. Serial stood barefoot by the floor heater, robe belted around her waist, the underlayer clinging close. Her crimson hair, still damp from the sonic rinse, fell loose over one shoulder. The glow of her freckles brightened in the warmth. She stared at the window with an expression Shaw recognized. Not relief, not triumph, but the wary posture of someone waiting for the world to snatch back what little it had given. "They can't take it from you," he said. "They could," she answered quietly. "If someone cared enough to look. They won't." He folded his arms, watching her reflection in the glass. "Ithrop doesn't waste attention on what it already threw away." She turned then, eyes sharp, gold burning against the dim light. "I want to hate them, but some part of me still wants them to see me again." "They won't," Shaw said. "So stop asking them to." She held his gaze, lips parting as though ready to argue. Instead, she exhaled and asked, "Then what am I now? If not an envoy, what am I here?" He hesitated only a moment. "A resident. Part of this tower." Her expression shifted, softened, but sharpened too, like the edge of a blade catching light. "Part of you," she murmured. "That too," he admitted. Silence stretched between them, the kind that wasn't engineered by machines, but human, raw and waiting. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance until she stood within reach. "You risked everything to alter the registry," she said. "If they find out, they'll erase your license, lock you out of the archives, strip everything you've built. I know. You're not afraid?" "I am," he said. "But I decided." Her breath caught, a soft sound more startling to him than any alarm. She searched his face for cracks, but he gave her none. Slowly, her shoulders eased, like she had been holding herself upright on wires too thin to last. "Come here," he said. She moved toward him carefully, each step measured, as if waiting for him to recoil. He didn't. She stopped close enough for the warmth of her body to brush his chest, her eyes searching his. For a moment, she looked almost fragile. Then she lifted her hand and touched his jaw, fingertips tracing the line of his face as though learning it by memory. "You're steady," she whispered. "You're not," he replied. "I know." Her hand trembled once, then stilled. She leaned in, resting her forehead briefly against his collarbone. His hand rose to her waist, firm and certain, and she let out a breath that sounded like surrender. When she pulled back, she walked to the window. The fog had returned in the corners, mist curling on the pane. She lifted one finger and wrote her name again, this time steady. Then, beneath it, she wrote his. Shaw stepped beside her and watched the two names glow faintly in the condensation. "They'll fade," he said. "Not tonight," she answered. Her gold eyes met his in the reflection. "If I stay, I'll disrupt you." "Yes," he said. A flicker of surprise, then a ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Good." She circled their names together with one glowing fingertip, enclosing them in a single line. For a moment the city outside, perfect and untouchable, seemed very far away. Inside Tower Verge, something had shifted irrevocably. Weeks unfolded quietly, though nothing about them felt ordinary. The tower, once sterile and hollow, filled with small signs of life. 2 mugs left cooling on the low table, damp towels draped near the heater, the faint scent of varan root broth lingering long after the pot had been emptied. Cereal moved through the rooms like she had always belonged, her bare feet whispering across composite floors, her crimson hair leaving dark trails of water after sonic showers. Where Shaw had once counted silence as survival, he now measured time in her movements, planting moss in hydro trays along the balcony rail, humming under her breath while she adjusted the vent cycles, brushing past him close enough that her shoulder grazed his, arm as though by accident. They had built patterns together without speaking of them. Mornings cataloging ghost signals, side by side. Afternoons stewing roots and Draxon mushrooms, their hands brushing as they passed utensils. Evenings stretched long on the couch, floor heater humming low, City lights fractured into pale threads across the fogged glass. It was a fragile defiance. Two people weaving disorder into the city's perfect latticework. And Shaw, who had sworn never to let anyone close again, found himself listening less to the ghosts and more to the cadence of her laugh when steam hissed too sharp from a pot dot. The approval came without fanfare. A sterile console voice declared, "Permanent residency. Granted." Status. Active. Serial stood frozen in front of the screen, her hands trembling. For a moment she didn't breathe, her golden eyes locked on the words as though they might vanish if she blinked. Shaw rose from the couch and crossed to her slowly, each step deliberate, controlled. He laid his hand on her back, steady and warm. Her chest rose sharply beneath his touch as she let out a breath she had been holding for months. "Can't take it back," she whispered. "They won't," he said. Her eyes flicked to him, and in that instant all the guarded tension she had carried since the ledge cracked. Relief swept across her face, so raw and quiet it made his chest ache. She gripped his shirt at the collar and pulled him down before he could prepare, pressing her mouth to his dot. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't hesitant. The kiss was full, certain, the act of someone anchor herself to the only solid ground she had left. Shaw caught her waist instinctively, pulling her closer, lifting her with an ease that startled her into a soft laugh against his mouth. Her legs wrapped around him, heat surging between them as he carried her across the room. When they reached the bed, the robe slipped from her shoulders, and she guided his hands to her body with unhurried certainty. The glow of her freckles flared brighter, pulsing with each heartbeat, casting faint light across his skin as he leaned down to taste the salt of her throat. She trembled beneath his touch, but not with fear, with release. With claiming. Shaw moved with the steadiness he carried into everything, holding her through every rise, every shudder, until she arched against him, whispering his name like it was proof of her existence. He followed her into that breaking point, spilling his breath into her mouth, both of them trembling, alive. Afterward, tangled in the sheets, Serial pressed her forehead against his jaw, her voice low, unguarded. "I never thought I'd feel safe enough to want this." "You are safe," he said, his arm wrapped tight around her waist. The city outside moved with perfect rhythm, its rain and lights and silence engineered to erase anomalies. But inside Tower Verge, in the warmth of the bed, Shaw and Serial lay together, not ghosts, not erased, but undeniable. For the first time in years, Shaw closed his eyes and let the quiet hold both of them. Morning light seeped through the condensation in pale vertical bands, casting thin bars across the floor. Shaw woke with Serial's hair spilled over his shoulder, her warmth pressed to his side. For a long moment he stayed still, breathing with her, letting the rhythm of her chest anchor him in a way the city never had. When she stirred, her gold eyes opened sharp as always, though softer now, less guarded. She kissed his jaw once, a fleeting brush, and rose to tie the robe around her waist. By the time Shaw brewed coffee, the console had already pulsed with a notification. Not routine. Hidden deep in the registry log was a trace of something that shouldn't exist. He frowned, pulled the entry into focus, and felt his chest tighten. A timestamp mismatch embedded in the line that had once erased Serial's envoy status. Someone hadn't just used a generic admin override. They'd used a council key. He didn't call her at once. He studied the file 3 times, stripping back protective layers until the signature was undeniable. Counselor-level clearance, stamped with a name the city revered for neutral oversight. The falsification hadn't been an accident. It had been ordered. Serial padded barefoot into the room, robe loose, hair tumbling crimson down her back. She caught the look on his face and went still. "What did you find?" He turned the console so she could see. The line glowed cold on the glass. She read it in silence, then set her hand against the screen, as though touching it might change the truth. "It wasn't bias," she said at last. Her voice trembled, but her body did not. "They wanted me erased. Counselor clearance," Shaw confirmed. His voice was steady, but inside something tightened. "Someone in the Registry Bureau ordered your removal. Manual authorization. They targeted you." Her jaw clenched, golden eyes blazing. "Then every speech I gave, every word, was recorded somewhere. They knew it wasn't failure. It was threat. Yes." He locked the console, forcing calm into each movement. "This is bigger than bureaucracy. If we reveal this, it's corruption at the core." She turned to him, standing very straight, despite the tremor still in her fingers. "If we expose them, they'll come for us. You'll lose your license, your tower, your archive." "I know," he said. "And you'd do it anyway?" Shaw met her gaze, unblinking. "I let you in. That decision doesn't end at the window." For a moment, the room felt utterly still, heavy with the choice hovering between them. Then Serial stepped close, laid her hand over his, and whispered, "Then we don't just survive. We fight." Outside, Ithrop Prime glowed flawless, rain carving perfect lines, trams humming in their prescribed loops. But on the fogged glass inside Tower Verge, two names glowed circled together, defiant proof against erasure. The city did not know it yet, but a fracture had opened in its silence. Shaw and Serial stood in its center ready to be hunted, ready to disrupt, ready to be more than ghosts.